Hey y'all, it is SPEDtacular SPEDucator and I am Miss D Hart. So today we are going to be talking about interviews. I just recently had my first time interviews with districts. I had 7 interviews. That's a lot. But I got some callbacks and I stuck with one, and so I want to tell y'all about my experience with these interviews because I know that a lot of videos online are about SPED interviews for teachers and not really for paras, and so this can maybe help anyone who is trying to be a para with their interview. And so let's just get into it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is teacher interview attire. So I had my mom consult me with this one because she is a businesswoman, and you know, her opinion, I value it because she interviews a lot of people. And so one thing that I do want to say is that for teacher interview attire, it's very different than everyday teacher attire, because this is something you can wear for everyday teacher attire: a cardigan, a nice blouse, and a skirt, but that is not really what I would recommend for an interview. So for my interview, I wore a black button-up with a collar, and I had a little brown necklace with it. I had my hair tied back, very neutral makeup, because you want to be able to be easy to look at. So that way when they're looking at you, they're not looking at your bright pink lipstick, or they're not looking at your bright orange shirt or something like that. And so my biggest tip is to be neutral, easy to look at, and appealing to the eye. The next thing I want to talk about is the types of interviews that I experienced. So the first interview that I had out of my 7 was a panel interview. And as someone who has never interviewed for a district before, it really shocked me. So I went into this interview, I saw 6 people, and I was like, oh, these people are all interviewing for the same position, it must be a group interview. And then they started introducing themselves, and they said, hi, I'm the principal, hi, I'm the assistant principal, hi, I'm the diagnostician, hi, I'm the counselor, hi, I'm the SPED teacher, hi, I'm this and this, and it was so scary. And so I didn't know that that was what I was walking into, but you know, I rolled with the punches and I did really good on that interview. And so that is one interview that you will probably experience, is a panel interview. There was 6 people on the biggest panel interview I had, and for the smallest panel interview I had, there was 3. And so the other type of interview that is more relaxed, more casual, is an individual interview. So this one, it was either just the principal or the assistant principal interviewing, and it was so much more casual, and it was just a lot more relaxed. And so those are 2 types of interviews that I think you should prepare yourself for, because you most likely will see them. So now about what to bring. I think this is probably the most important segment of this video. So one thing that I really recommend that you bring, and I'm going to give a shout out to Brooke Reagan on TPT because she saved my life with this one, is this SPED teacher binder. So she has this on TPT. It was very affordable, and this got me through these interviews, and I'm so glad that I brought this. I know that for teacher interviews, you usually bring a portfolio and things like that, but as an undergrad and someone who's interviewing for SPED, you probably don't have a portfolio, and you probably aren't going to be able to make one that fast. So I got this binder, and I used it during my interviews, and it made me sound so prepared. So I really love this binder, and it's also not something just that I could use for my interview. It's something that I'm going to be able to use as a para because it's very user-friendly. So one thing about bringing items that are not made by you to your interview is that you have to tell the people that are interviewing you, like, hey, I didn't make this item, but I know how to implement it so well in the classroom, and I am very comfortable using this item. So because say if they know what that resource is on TPT and you say you made it, that's not a very good impression. So the other items that I think are so important within this binder that I used are the IEP at a glance, the data collection, and then Brooke Reagan, she also has token boards, and those were all things that I used, and I'm about to show you them right now. So the first thing I want to show you is the token boards. So this is something that I showed in almost all of my interviews, and they all loved because it has visuals and it has big bold words, has the visuals, and it is a token board, so it comes off like that, and you can add new goals every day. So this keeps the students accountable for themselves, and it manages their behavior and things like that. So they loved that. The interviewers loved that. Another thing that they loved is the IEP at a glance page. So as a para, you're not going to be in the IEP meetings, but you do have to implement the IEP goals within the classroom as you're helping your teacher. So you have to know what's on the IEP, you have to know the goals, the accommodations, and things like that. You have to know what services they're going to, such as speech and things like that, but you are not the one who is creating the IEP. So this IEP at a glance paper is something that I showed the interviewers, and I showed them that I am able to understand what is on the IEP, and I'm able to implement that in the classroom. And so they loved that. They loved that. So that is something that I recommend that you bring, is showing them that you are able to implement IEPs. Another thing that I recommend that you bring is a way of collaborating with your fellow SPED teacher. So one thing that they're really interested in is collaboration, and Brooke Reagan has the perfect sheet for that within this binder. It is her teacher communication form. And so on this form, it has student strengths, student weaknesses, and suggested accommodations. So for a para, you can use this for your students, jot down their strengths, jot down their weaknesses, jot down what accommodations you think would fit them the best, and then you can collaborate with the lead teacher and see what y'all can implement together. And so that's something that they really love too. So those are the three things from this binder that I used the most. They're not the only things that I use, but they're what I use the most. And once again, that binder is from Brooke Reagan on TPT, Teacher Pay Teachers. And another thing that I think that you should bring to this interview is paper and pencil, because while you're interviewing for this position, you are also interviewing them for yourself. You want to make sure that this school is a good fit for you. So during every interview at the end where they ask, well, do you have any questions? I made sure to ask all my questions, jot down the answers, and this not only lets you record what the school is like, but it also lets the school know that you're interested and that you're a note taker, you're a goal getter, and things like that. And so one last thing that I do recommend that you bring is your resume. So when they're interviewing you, they ask you stuff that's on your resume, and if you made your resume 5 years ago, you probably don't remember exactly what you wrote on there. And so I think you should bring your resume, so that way if they ask you something about it, that way you can just refer back to your resume. For about interview questions and answers. This one, I am only, although I was asked like a bunch of questions, I'm only gonna tell you about the questions that were most asked. So like for all my 7 interviews, this was asked for each interview. So those are the questions that I'm gonna tell you, and those are the questions I'm gonna answer for you. So the first question is the about yourself question. So the first thing that they always ask you in every single one of your interviews is, okay, tell me a little about yourself. And the things that I said to those questions, obviously they'll differ from everybody, but I think the most important things to say are, if you're an undergrad student or if you're a graduate, you know, is that, oh, I have this and this degree, or oh, I am working on this and this degree. And then I told them about why I chose SPED, because a lot of the times they get applicants who don't have SPED experience but want to do SPED. And so if you are in that boat, I think it's very important during this question that you answer why you want to do SPED. So you could say, oh, I love these kids so much, I want to be there to help them, or oh, this is my major, things like that, or oh, this is what I graduated in, this is the major that I graduated in. So those are great answers to that question. And then the last thing that I said when they asked for me to tell them about myself was the types of experiences that I had with special needs students. So I told them about that, and then I wrapped it up, and that was the answer to that question. And then the next question that usually follows after that is that they give you scenarios in the classroom that you have to answer those, like what you would do in those scenarios to your best ability. And for some of the questions, it'll depend on the type of classroom that you're interviewing for. So if you're interviewing for, say, a behavior SPED class, they're going to ask you questions like, so what do you do in a situation where a student is throwing a chair? But if you're in a, say, an inclusion SPED class, they'll tell you something. So when the student is in the gen ed class and they're disrupting the class, what do you do at that point? And so those are a few examples of the scenarios that they'll give. And so one of the tips that I have to answer that is to use special education terms. So a couple of the terms that they really liked that I knew was IEP, which is Individualized Education Plan. In Texas, that's what we have. I'm not sure about other states. We have CPI, we have de-escalation, we have data collection. And so those are 4 terms that I think that are really, really important to use while answering the questions about scenarios. And so one of the terms that they really liked was de-escalation. So before it gets, like a scenario gets too out of hand, you'll want to be sure to de-escalate it, and it's kind of self-explanatory what that means. And so those were probably the trickiest questions, because you're not really sure what each school's protocol is for scenarios like that. And so you have to answer these questions almost on your tippy toes and on eggshells, because each school does have protocols set in place, or each district has protocols set in place of what they do specifically when students are, say, throwing chairs or something like that, or maybe, you know, self-inflicting harm. And so they do have protocol for that. And so one of the tips that I have is to use the terms, and also maybe do some research on whatever district you're interviewing for and see if you can find their protocol for something like that. And so one other question that they asked frequently in all these interviews was about classroom behavior management. So once again, this will also depend on what kind of SPED position you're applying for. So if you're applying for behavior, these answers are going to be slightly different from the answers for someone who is applying for maybe life skills or something. So for life skills and behavior and, say, inclusion, self-contained, those answers will all be different for class behavior management. But one thing that I did show you earlier that I used to answer all these questions was the token board. So I think that those token boards and resources that you bring with you that I just talked about previously, those are some things that I used to answer all of the questions that they had for me. And it also, when you have something to show them, it shows them that you're prepared, and it shows them that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're going to implement. And it also helps you, because when they ask you a question and maybe you're nervous, you can be like, oh, okay, so here, let me show you this, and this is what I'll do. And it kind of triggers what you're going to say when you have something to show them. And so it makes it easier for you. So another thing that they'll ask you about is, do you know what is going to happen in a SPED class? So they want to know, do you know what an IEP is? Do you know what ARD is? Do you know what CPI is? And things like that. So I think it's really important to go and refresh your memory, or maybe learn some of these terms if you've never heard them before, to better answer those questions, because it's always better to do your research than it is to sit there in an interview and say, you know what, I'm not sure, because they don't want to hear that really. They want to hear that, yes, I do know what these terms are, and I do know how to use these in the classroom. I do know how to implement that. And so those are the major question and answers that I have for you. Okay, so now that we got all the nitty-gritty out of the way, I have just a couple tips for you. So one of the tips is to just calm down, because when I was having that first interview, I was so nervous. It was over Zoom, because we are in a pandemic right now. It was over Zoom. I was so nervous. I was sitting here, I was drinking water because I didn't want my throat to choke up. I was just so nervous. So one thing that I do recommend is to do something that calms you down. So say if that's a breathing technique, do your breathing technique. If that's like looking at pictures of your significant other, because that's what I did, you know, then do that. If it's hugging your dog, do that. Just do something that can calm you down right before your interview, because it's so important to be able to answer these questions calmly, not rush through them and things like that. My second tip is to bring items with you. I think the most important thing, and the thing that really got me my position, was that I brought items with me. So I really think that this binder, there we go, this binder by Brooke Reagan, I really think that helps me so much. And I'm not an expert, I'm not telling you to go buy this binder and spend money, but you know, just if you have something that you think will answer those questions and help you answer those questions that they have, bring it, because they love to see that you know what you're doing, that you're passionate about what you're doing, and things like that. So that is probably, that should have been my first tip, because that I feel like is more important, is to bring items with you. So now I just want to tell y'all, good luck. I think that y'all will do amazing. Even if you don't watch this video, I know everyone out there who has a passion for SPED, it's really near and dear to your heart, because SPED, it just has to be near and dear to your heart. And I love it so much, and I hope that you all get your dream jobs just like I did. And if this video helped you out, leave a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time for hopefully a less serious video. Bye y'all.